Hello and welcome to Tuesday's Encounters from New York. This program is presented every Tuesday at 7 p.m. New York time. My name is Mark Beecher and I'll be your host tonight. We'd like to welcome tonight's very special guest, Shaman Georgia Fausther from Gabon, Africa, currently residing in Hawaii, luckily. And Georgia tonight will discuss ancestral healing as it pertains to her life and how she pursues her life. So, Georgia, if you could please join us and introduce
Hi.
yourself.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Georgia Fausther, and I am indeed a fourth generation shaman and a ancestral healer. I call myself an ancestral healer because I focus on healing the relationship between the ancestors and the person that I'm working with. And I also focus on helping that person open up to the richness in their ancestry. It's something I sort of grew into. Growing up, I was very much told to respect the ancestors and showed how to, but it didn't really click back until I was much older and my grandmother passed away. And then when she passed away, I started to see her and I knew there were things I had to work with her on. So it took me a while, but I ended up essentially doing that work. And it's through doing that work with my grandmother and with my own lineage that I was able to open up to helping others. Mhm.
Very good. You said you essentially started this out almost as a child.
Yeah, so I was born a medium, so I was born seeing, and so I always saw essentially energies of people who had passed away. But when I was younger, I saw a lot more things. So I sort of had to close that or, sort of dampen that connection in order to essentially go through my teenage years. But once I was done with teenage years, yeah, it sort of like came back little by little. But once it came back, it was like it never really left. So growing up, they taught me a lot about ancestral veneration because I'm African and also because, it's something we do. So they taught me a lot about that. And I used to also see the people that had passed and see the elders. And so those two sort of were with me when I grew up. But there was a point in my life where I was very much my mother passed away and I was young and I was doing a lot of different things. So I sort of strayed away from it and sort of shut it off. But by the time I was like back in my 20s and 30s, I was definitely back doing those kind of things. And that's when I was having a lot of those issues with my family and having to deal with certain things. And around that time, my grandmother died. And when she died, it sort of like opened that door for me to go deeper. Yes, yes.
So you're actually channeling ancestors. Do you have visions of ancestors?
Yes, when I work with people, I work with calling forward their healed ancestors and my own healed ancestors. My own healed ancestors help me with doing certain work if there's work to be done. And their healed ancestors are essentially talking to me and explaining to me, like, what is the issue? Or it depends on what we do, but they will sort of like step forward and chime in. And that's how I get a lot of the information and a lot of the things that they need to work on because the ancestors, they know you, right? They're part of the line. You hold some of their DNA. So they are aware of all the things that are yours. And a lot of times also in lineages, they've left stuff there, right? Stuff they couldn't get through and things like that. So once you start that connection, then you're able to sort of shift out any of the things that they weren't able to shift.
Okay, so the channeling is giving positive advice to situations people need to correct in their lives.
Yes, the channeling does, it points out the areas that need work, and then if that person is okay, then later on we do the work. Or sometimes it gets done right away depending on the person's ancestors, because some ancestors are like really eager and can do the work right away, and certain ancestors prefer that like you prepare yourself and things like that. But yes, essentially they step forward, they give like if you have questions, and as people come to me when they have specific family issues, like with their mom or with their dad or with their great grandma, or if they think something's going on in their lineage, or oftentimes as well, I get people who are who think they might have like they might have been a victim of like spiritual sort of attacks, and then they want to see if it's in the line and things like that. Hmm.
Okay, so you started out a lot of this as a sort of a tribal culture.
So
Um,
yeah, it's very much a cultural thing. Yes, in my country itself, there are people like me who do this for others. They just do it differently. My country has a lot of closed spiritual religions, and I'm not initiated into any of those closed spiritual religions. So what I do is sort of like the rogue stuff. It's like I'm not initiated into a lot of the things that I'm able to do, but I'm able to do them because I've had ancestors who were, if that makes sense. Yeah.
okay, so you're in Hawaii. So you're
Yes.
working one-on-one with your clients, or you're working over the internet with people, or
I
um,
work over the internet simply
mhm.
because a lot of the people that I interact with, like they're not here in Hawaii. I have done one-on-one work in Hawaii. But that's usually like, oh, like one of my clients is like, oh, I'm going to be in Hawaii. Can I get a session? And we do one of those. But the Hawaiian people are very much tied to their ancestors and very much have that culture and that. So I don't get much of them. So I don't do a lot of one-on-ones like that. I will do long distance work, and we do work across Zooms and things. But yes, if I'm on location, I don't mind doing one-on-ones. Normally, though, the nature of my work of where these people are compared to, where I am in Hawaii, I do Zooms and long distance.
um, so we're in the New York area, and it's
Mhm.
very multicultural,
Yeah.
very diversified. Um, so do you work with people that don't have strong connection to their
Yes.
culture?
Yes, I do. It's actually a lot of the work that I do. It helps people with finding their roots. Ancestral work helps people with finding their roots and their identity. And so a lot of people come to me not knowing, like, be like, oh, I don't know, which side it's coming from, or I don't know who my ancestors are. I do work with people like that. And what I do for that is I essentially call the ancestors forward, and then I'm able to pinpoint, or they're able to tell me sort of like the area where the person can find that information, and also the areas that they're from and stuff. But there's a lot of ancestors that I work with as well who aren't people are surprised to realize that they have ancestors who aren't like human ancestors. So I do work with those as well. But as far as human ancestors, I have had plenty of people who do not know who their ancestors are. Um, but when you call them forward, they respond. And so I was able to give them information and messages, and also like able to narrow down the search for them. So I do that sometimes.
Um, right, and because mostly we don't know our ancestors beyond one or two generations previous. Um,
Yes,
you know,
yes. And
or
that's
just
really like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
now, I'm just assuming like, okay, we're a descendant from English, culture, and that's about as much as we know, that type of thing. Um,
Yes, and very much. And it's very interesting, like to see how I guess certain people really do know. Like they will go and, look up their genealogy and stuff. And then certain people really don't have an idea, but do end up in exactly where they're supposed to be. And I find that very interesting because I'm like, oh, your roots are right where you are. And they'll be like, oh, okay, I didn't. Yeah, you must have known somehow. Yeah, yeah.
um, so, okay, do you use any special format
Not really. The work that
to
I
run a session?
Not really. I have a signature session that I run, which essentially goes over what I call your ancestral story. That's about as systematic as I am. And your ancestral story essentially contains the origins, right, of yourself and your soul.
Mm.
And also those origins after I go through like what are the skills that are in your lineage and what are the skills that you have from that lineage. And then also I go through like what are the patterns, the repeating patterns, the patterns that, you know, need to go. And so then we look into those. And after that, then we come to a point of like essentially like future, because you end up being an ancestor, right? So then there's like what is the stuff that you want to put in lineage, and what are the things that you want to sort of grow from that lineage. And then so by the time I'm done with that signature session, you have a ton of information on essentially a lot about the things that you were into, the things your ancestors were into. And then from there, we usually, if there's anything that comes up like, oh, we need to heal this, or, you know, then we go through like a different healing. But like I said, usually the ancestors are like gung ho about it and they'll just clear while I'm doing that session. But a lot of times there might be integration work, or they might be sort of like grounding some of that stuff in that comes after. But that is the initial process. Like when you first come through, we do the ancestral story so that we can find those things out. Because when I go through those things, the ancestors will tell me if there was like some sort of black magic in the line, if there was like, you know, a tragic thing they need to clear in the line, or if there's like some way the line itself needs to be reinforced. And then essentially anything you do within your lineage clears for your generation, and then 7 generations backwards and forwards, they say. In Africa, it just clears. Well, where I'm from, they just say it clears all the way through. But so working on those things that come up and really, you know, digging into, okay, where am I from? And, you know, what other things? These help give those answers to people as like, you know, where I come from, what am I into, those kind of things. And then it also helps because it helps open your eyes, right, to why you are the way that you are. Because you might not know, or you might have an idea like, yeah, there's something like, and it's in my family. But once your ancestors step forward and actually like tell you what those things are, then you're like, oh, that makes so much more sense. And you're able to sort of flow past those things. It really does help, I think, with identity, a big part of it. And also with like, you know, when you're living through your life. Some families have, you know, infertility, some families have like illnesses and stuff within them, and those kind of things sort of come to light when you do ancestral healing, and you're able to clear and guide those things so that they don't happen again.
Right. So if, you know, if I come to this life with a purpose, um, if I'm not fulfilling that purpose, you will get some information from the ancestral.
Yes, they
And
can tell you parts of it, like the parts that they worked with you on, or the parts that they can see. Sometimes an ancestor will say, well, I don't know what you are in this particular life, but when we thought of you, this is what we thought of. Or when we worked with you, or when we were together on this place, this is what you did. And then you'll start to essentially be tap into those things. Because when someone says it, then you're able to be like, oh, it sort of like helps you remember. And then they can also like do things to bring those things up further, or essentially like shift those things to the forefront. But yeah, it can really help with telling you not exactly what your purpose is, though your ancestors, most of them do know. It's about like you figuring out for yourself. They can really help you with like where you've been and what you picked up and what is available in your lineage for you to use to get to that purpose, or to like essentially live out that mission, because you chose your body, you chose your family, you chose your mom, your dad, and things. So you chose those people for reasons. The ancestors have those answers. They know why, right? And they can be like, hey, think about this, or this is why. Or and then a lot of times as well, they might open up your memories. Like you might remember something from when you were little, or be like, oh yeah, such and such always did this. So those kind of things then later on down the line, when you sit down and you review those things, they will help you with like essentially telling you a story. And it's not just your own soul story, but like the story of your lineage. So you can essentially, you know, make those changes. I know for me, I worked in my line a lot with like women and like sexual distortion. It was a lot of that in my line. I'm African. There is a lot of like intense sorrow and sort of trauma to work through. And once I work through that, I know, you know, my nieces are American. They were born and raised here, but they had a much easier time with some of the stuff that me and my sister had a harder time with coming up when it came to, to sexual stuff. And a lot of sort of that the distortion that was in my line around that cleared. So if you have those kind of things, in your line, or any sort of like there's alcoholism or there's this, there's that, it really helps to sit with the ancestors and go back to the root of that, because they really do can or know where that root is. Like they can go back. You might only remember 3 generations, but they're present for all. So they can tell you like, this is where this started with such and such, or this is how you clear it from the root. And then you won't see it in your family again, or in your lineage anyway.
Oh, okay. So, and you were mentioned that not all of our ancestors were human.
Yes, and that is something people are always shocked to learn. But
Okay.
yes, with your human DNA, not all of your ancestors were human. And that's something I was also shocked to learn. Because when I came to this, I started being like, oh, I want to call all of my ancestors, forward. And I knew which ones I knew in my head for this one. But when others started showing up, I was like, hmm. And then one time one showed up that was not human. It was actually a tree, like a tree person. And I was like, what? And then I ended up asking, and it was like, no, definitely you have like that sort of DNA in your line. And also in past lives, I was part of essentially a world where it was all trees, and I was one of those trees. And again, growing up, I had a tree in my house. I had a mango tree, and it really felt like my best friend. And when I did that, calling those ancestors forward, and I asked, and I figured out I was from that tree land, one of the people that came through was that tree. And I was like, oh, of course, now it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, certain of your DNA, because I call from your soul's DNA, right? I call the ancestors forwards from the ones that are connected to your soul, because your soul has had many lifetimes. If you believe that, and you believe that you've had many lifetimes in many different places, then those ancestors are also your ancestors. So they come through. I've had people, I've had a white girl from Australia. She called forward ancestors, and they were Zulu people. She was born in South Africa, and she had previous lives in South Africa. That's why she was reborn there like that. And the people that came were like a full Zulu tribe. And I was just like, this is the most, but they were still human. And then I've had others where my first one that I did was someone who had DNA that wasn't human, part of it. It ended up being a plant. It was like a plant planet. And so they were almost like a hive mind together. There was like one big mind, and like the plant just grew there and came to say certain things. And I was like, this is really trippy. But that's when I realized that, yeah, we don't all have not all our ancestors are human, and the ones that aren't humans, they're the ones to help you with the mission usually. Because I don't know what happens, but like your galactic ancestors, the ones that are like from star seeds and all those things, they're the ones that help you with the mission here on Earth. And then your Earth ancestors, they help you, or your 3D ancestors, as I like to call them, they help you with like your human life. Like if you're not happy with your mom, or you have issues with your dad, or you're not able to have kids, like they help you with those things. But your galactic ones, because they know you have a bigger purpose, they know about that mission. That's usually what they're about. They're like, we're here to help you remember the mission. We're going to do the surgery to help you remember the mission. Yeah.
Um, so some of the ancestral could be, I know we've had discussions about in previous life hypnosis. And,
Yes.
some people claim, yes, you come back as a tree, or you've come back, they even said you come back as a rock. But so you're including that into your ancestral line because you had a previous lifetime
Where you were
that was
that, and
that was not
in
human.
that you had, yes, and you
Right.
in that you had family. So when I, like I said, when I call for ancestors, the way I do it is I call for all the ancestors related to your soul, not your in your human body, but your actual soul. And so those guys, when they step forward, some of them are from your 3D life right now, and some of them, if you are into reincarnation and you believe that, will come from your past lives. And I mean, I've seen it, and I've seen people who, didn't believe it until I said something like, oh, they said that you did this with them. And then they would be like, oh my gosh, I love doing that. What the? And that's how they were able to actually believe that they had other lives. But yes, what I describe as ancestors is and essentially any energy that is tied to your soul in a past capacity, like they're not here on earth anymore, or they're from your past life, or they're, your galactic family from like not even when you were on this earth. Yeah, because they all come forward. I figured, especially, so I do a lot of my work through the Akashic, and that plane is a pretty high plane. So when I work on that plane, they all come. So we're being able to see all the different races and see all the different people. Yeah, I had to believe it. I was just like, oh wow. Because yeah, I thought we were, in the beginning of this, I thought when I called ancestors, the way they taught me back home is either you call an ancestor like a 3D ancestor, or what will come through is a deity. I didn't know that there was a difference.
Uh, right. And I'm glad you brought up the Akashic because that was one of my thoughts. And this is all the whole total entirety of the Akashic record is basically
Yeah.
open to you. You can just channel into that.
And my sessions in the beginning used to be called Ancestral Akashic Record Readings. Yes,
Okay.
because what I found out is I am actually an Akashic reader. I'm a trained Akashic reader. And then when I would go up, because I'm also very ancestral in my like energy, carry very much of that African sort of, and my grandmother was a shaman in Africa and things like that. I realized when I went up there and I started asking for different things for myself, a lot of things that would come through would be like, African in nature or ancestral in nature. And then I was like, I wonder if I can pull my ancestors up here. And I asked one day, like, I want to see all of my ancestors. And they all came through. And that's when, so yeah, for me, like, I like to play with things like that. I play with energy. I play with figuring out, like, oh, is this for me? What is this? And so that's sort of how I figured it out. I used to access the Akashic plane, like, spontaneously, and that's how I wanted to learn what it was. And then once I learned what it was and that I could do it, that led me into like ancestral part of the Akashic record. So yeah, what in back home where I'm from, like they call it I'm connected to the ancestral river. But whether it's the ancestral river or the Akashic, ancestral Akashic, like that's essentially the specialty. Like I can, yeah. I can pull just about any ancestral through the ancestral energy through the Akashic. And yeah, it definitely, that plane definitely does have a lot of information, and it definitely does help. That's why, for me, working with ancestors isn't just ancestral veneration. It's like, let's do some of this clearing, let's do some of this like healing so that, the next generations will be great. And your ancestors are always keen on that. Like anything that has to do with making more ancestors or anything that has to do with making sure the line is steady and happy, they're down to help because that's how they survive. Yeah.
Um, Approximately how many generations will we consider the Akashic record? I mean, hundreds, thousands? Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
would say thousands. I would say it's not quite infinite. And that's what I'm getting. Not quite infinite, but I would definitely say thousands. Yes.
Um, so you're instantaneously you can connect to the Akashic plane.
So again, because I was born like sort of seeing and doing things, I didn't know, like when I did it at first, all I saw was colors. And I kept asking, like, where's that plane that has all the colors? And what do we do there? And eventually one of my mentors was like, did you say a plane with all the colors? And I explained like what I do to get up there. And then they were like, that's the Akashic record. You're just seeing colors right now. Because Metatron works there and Metatron works with the colors. And I was like, oh, okay. So once they taught me like the actual process, then I was able to like see everything. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's spontaneous because I had to learn, right, to read the dimension and to figure out, what it was. But I was able to, yeah, and I think most people are able to. If you have a good time of like peace and quiet and you're happy, you're able to reach different dimensions. You just don't recognize that that's it. So, and you can't hold that vibration. So you fall back to what you're normally used to. But I mean, most of us are in our happiest time or in our lovingest time, or like when we feel like, yeah, we really just like poop back up. It's just because we can't hold it there. We slowly come back down. But yeah, the Akashic plane is something I've been I've been able to work with for a while. It's just like I said, it really takes a skilled psychic to interpret it essentially. I was able to see it, but it didn't make no sense to me. I was just like, oh, what? And then later on, someone was like, taught me like, hey, this is how you see it. This is how you. And so I was able to essentially refine my vision when it came to the Akashic. When I refined it, I figured that like I had this specialty to be able to see a lot of the ancestral because I was already working ancestral stuff. I was like, oh, this works. So now I do, yeah. But I started off as an Akashic reader and a psychic medium, and then I went into my ancestral work. I had to be trained for some of it by my grandma, and some of it is just stuff I figured out. Yeah, and I'm still figuring a lot of stuff out, but for me, this way has really helped. And I hope that, a lot more people take to it because it also does heal, right? A lot of us have, think that our ancestors were like evil people or have like bouts of ancestors that I don't know, may have hurt others and things, and then we carry these big guilts and things, and it's really unnecessary because, I've had someone tell me like, none of my ancestors were good, and I was like, that's a lie. There's always one, right? So doing those things where you're tapping into and hearing those messages and sort of figuring those things out, it helps with changing your perspective on those things. It helps with you really knowing the truth and you being able to move on. Because some of that stuff, like, it's not going to feel good until you look at it. It's not going to feel good until you figure it out, right? And again, I also have people who come to me about, adoptions and things like that. And they got adopted, don't know from where, don't know from when. Those things can really like, for us, identity is a big thing. If we don't know who we are, it's like sort of disorienting, right? Lucky for me, I was born in Africa and they teach you a lot of that through the culture and the likes. But even, certain Africans don't know who they are. So, but yeah, it really does.
Yeah. Do you think culture, society in general has become more open to the ancestral situation, conditioning, to the Akashic record? We're becoming more, as we claim, to be enlightened.
Yeah, I do think that there is definitely a movement of enlightenment. I know there's a lot of fake light and fake gurus and a bunch of stuff going on, yes. But I do think that the people that are stepping forward in honesty definitely have had that opening. And I do think that, it's about time because how can you believe the government has been hiding aliens all your life and is now bringing out expose of aliens, but you don't believe that the people that came before you, could still hang around or could have a spirit that hangs around. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think those things are very like truncated. So I think it's a good thing that everyone is starting to open up to more so that, those things can sort of like alchemize and you can have both. Yes, I believe the government hid the aliens, but also I believe, the ancestors are real because, only believing in the negative or the perverse or the stuff we don't know versus actually believing the truth, which is energy has been here all along, aliens have been here all along, et cetera, et cetera. Like, yeah, I think it makes a difference. I think it makes a difference. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really glad that, people are discovering those things and are helping themselves because overall we're a planet of like people who, we're a lot of hurting. I think that there's a lot of hurt in our planet and especially back in the 90s and, the 80s and those kind of times. So now that like people are now like, let's care more about each other and the way we affect the planet and stuff, I think we're becoming more of that generation that it's going to leave something better to the next generation. That's always my thing, like you're part of the lineage. So what is your legacy to your lineage? Is it chaos and I don't know? Is it complacence and I don't care? Or is it like, I'm going to do this so that, the people next coming after me can, and honestly, I don't judge. It took me, I'm 40. So it took me like, I don't know, 20 something years to start my path, get on my path, be in my path, so I get that it takes time, but I think that it is time for that to start picking up some because we are really entering some unprecedented times and there's really opportunities for you to set your lineage, set your life in a really good way. And I think that, we need to stop being ignorant and of like, oh, we don't see it, or we're just, doing for ourselves. Because back then, they didn't do that and their societies thrived more. Now we're all like individualistic and it's causing some issues. I think, it's what is needed is a little bit of both. Yes, it's important to be innovative and to be independent but it's also important to do the things that are going to leave a better world for our children and children, like taking care of the earth, like, making sure we're not creating horrible inventions that they'll have to run and hide from later on. I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like making sure that we leave something for them and that, we help ourselves because like you going around not healing yourself isn't helping yourself or anyone.
Right. Now, actually, technology in the last 100 years or whatever has made life much easier. We don't, and you get a sense from much earlier generations that life was more brutal. Life was more, it was actually come down to hunter gatherers where you had a function in the tribe and that was your goal, that was your function. Now we have much more, open fields that we can do things with.
No, you're right on that. But the difference is, right? Back then, the inventions were simple. They were meant to do what they were meant to do. And also back then, times were simpler, right? We didn't have as much distractions and things like that. Now, yeah, life might be more convenient for us because of all of the inventions, but also life is more dangerous. We have more EMFs, more this, more that continue to make us sick. And we also have like, what is this thing with like, oh, creating the God particle? Where is that going other than to create massive, holes where people used to be? Like I feel like back then the inventions were smaller and the impact was, a lot less. Now with one push of a button you can take out half the world. Back then
Right.
you couldn't do that, right? And yeah, technology advances for things to be convenient is great. And I'm not saying I don't love my conveniency, but what I'm saying is it worth the God particle? Is it worth the nukes? Like, is us being able to call Uber or us being able to program a robot to come and make us food like really better than us living under the threat of nuke bombs? Or do you know what I mean? For me, it's like, yes, we can make more advances, and yes, we are given more things to play with, but should we really create the things that we come upon? Because then now those things are in the world, and now there's no way to get rid of them. The things is out there, and those things like back then you couldn't press a button and kill a whole race of people. Now you can. So what is the price that we pay for that? Like, what is the price of our conveniency? It's living under the threat of God particles, EMFs, nuke wars, and cancer all the time. For conveniency, I mean, I don't know. I'd rather go get my water from the well. If you're gonna give me cancer, I'd rather just get it from the well. I'll walk 3 hours. It's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Right. The ancestors, when they're giving suggestions, um, do they have a more basic um, suggestions, a more, not specific to, okay, you need to do A, B, C, and D, or it's a more general, enlightened.
Yes, yes. A lot of people think ancestral work is what they've seen in the movies and in the stuff where it's like, oh, I gotta, make an altar, then I gotta bring sugar, buy wine, pour the wine, do the stuff and ancestral work, maybe back then that's what it was, but it isn't that now. Like the ancestors will give you a general message, and also if you're asking specifically for something they will cater that message specifically for whatever, but they're not the type to be like, okay, first you're going to do this, then you're going to do that, then you're going to do this and get there. They'll say things like, if you are looking to achieve this way is one way to do it. And then you can say, well, I'd rather do it this way. And they'll be like, okay, no problem. We're just showing you a way to do it. Or if you're looking to achieve this is the way to do it. Now, when you go into that way to do it, then they will be like, oh, this, if you're trying to do it, essentially, if you try it and you don't make it, then they'll be like, okay, maybe refine it. And they will help you until you can get in, like, do whatever it is that you wanted to do. But they're not like about giving you step by step by step right away, unless it's something that you require. Like, my sister, that's one of the things she requires when she works with her team. She tells them, like, you have to be very clear with me and you have to like write the answer down. And I don't know how she did this, but now whenever you ask her, because she is also a psychic, when like she sees like when she talks to people, she sees the answers being written down clearly because that's what she asked for. So yes, you can work with your ancestors you can cater that work. So if you don't like step one, step two, step three, they won't give it. And normally they don't give it. They will give you the general overview of this is how we do it, or this is how it's been done in this family. And then you can figure out how you want to do it. And if you say, this is the way I want to do it, they'll be like, okay, this is the way we're going to help you do it. That's it.
Um, you said you would, well, at an early age you were into this, and then in, I guess, possibly in your teenage years you turned away from it and then came back to it. Everybody has their own journey, but is there time that you think people should start to study
I
their
don't think there's
ancestry?
I don't think there's a time. I think when you think about you think about it, that's when you should do it. Because if you thought about it, or if you've had this inkling of like, I need to work this out with my aunt, or I need to stop ignoring my dad, or I need to, that's when you need to start. Because essentially, if you had the inkling, the niggle, the intuitive hit, it means that there's something in your life or in your experience that's going to need that, or that's going to need that particular thing. So, I for me, I would advise, right, that the earlier you start, the better, well, simply because it's easier, right? And there are definitely like certain things to get through to begin even talking to the ancestors like 24/7, 7 days a week, right? There might be things you need to overcome or things you need to work on. So the earlier the better for sure. But my case was somewhat, I think, a little special because, again, I was very much born seeing in Africa, which made me see a whole lot of entities and stuff. And then when I stopped seeing, it was very much out of like fear, right? So, like, it wasn't that I shut it down because I was scared. I was getting a lot of things, and my mother had passed away. And because she's now in the spirit realm, she was one of the people. And that used to scare the heck out of me as a kid, right? And so around that age, I just sort of like because I didn't I knew I had the skill and I knew I had the gift, but I didn't have the maturity and the understanding to be like, yes, my mom is on the other side, and that's why she's talking to me. I was like, oh my gosh, my dead mom is talking to me. That's weird. You know what I mean? It was not the same thing.
Um,
So maybe don't start too early, but
yeah,
definitely I would start earlier.
I know you mentioned one thing, and do animals or do certain visions or symbols have special meaning?
So for that, it's cultural, right? It's very much cultural. There are certain animals that have a big, well, most animals have a spiritual meaning. But what animals you see in your ancestral journeys or what animals you see in your spiritual journeys, that's very much either like very personal, like due to to your own energies, or it's like the animals and the things from your culture. So for me, in my country, there's elephants still around, there's jaguars still around, and elephants and jaguars will step into the village like out of the blue. So if I'm, and then my sister has a gorilla. My sister has a gorilla ancestral connection, like because we have silverback gorillas in my country too. But like that's her own like ancestor, I guess, or helper. And for me, it's normally like a big cat because I am a Leo and I've always like loved lions. It's normally a big cat. If I see one in Africa, like on my journeys or anywhere, I'm like, oh, that's the message probably, or that's my animal. But it really depends on your culture and the things you were raised around. Like you might not ever see a jaguar in your ancestral path, but things like jaguar definitely are. Jaguar, normally either um the jaguar is the one I know for sure because I see it everywhere. The jaguar is one that comes in multiple religions, like, well, not multiple religions, multiple cultures. And it's definitely a sign of like also usually birds. whether it's an eagle, whether it's a crow, whether it's usually birds, peacock, birds. So birds are also symbols normally of like your ancestors are trying to reach you, or that sort of thing. But it's very much tied to your culture. Like um right now I'm working with what that is, a guardian of my country. And but it's like culture. If I was to explain this person to anyone else, they'd be like, never seen, never heard. But if I was to explain that person in my country, they'd be like, oh yeah. And they would tell you exactly who that person is. So, or who that animal or that thing, that entity is. So yeah, it's very much culture related. You might see some that are related to your culture. And definitely I see a lot, like if I see them, they're related to a person's culture. Like I'll see eagles a lot of times with like Americans and Native Americans, or sometimes I see fishes with a certain islands. I see like a big fish, and I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, it really is cultural based or personal based. Like you might have studied with like a Indian guru, and then you spent time in India. So then when you come back, some of your ties are Indian. Like some of the guides and energies that you now hold are Indian energy. So I might look at you and be like, oh, you don't necessarily look Indian, but you've got this person, that person, that person. And I know those are Indian, essentially ancestral things. And then they'll say like, oh yeah, I studied in India, or I lived in India for this long. And so yeah, it really is like area specific, that one, and specific to the person itself. Because even though you might have an area specific guide or ancestor, you might not have come from that area. It might be like an area where you spent 6 months in and you really loved it, and so that you developed this guide that, or that this guide came with you and now is with you. So yeah, that one is, it really depends. But normally jaguars all across the board, like in almost I think every religion, a jaguar, usually a big cat and a bird will be like the ones that are ancestral more so. Like I have a ton of birds around my house. It actually looks like Hitchcock's The Birds. And I'm usually like, yeah, okay. And people say that when they get here, like, oh my gosh. But then when they get inside the house, they're like, your house has such great energy. Yeah, it's the ancestors and the birds.
You attract birds. Yeah. Um,
I definitely do.
and actually, when the thought that came to me when you said it was sort of cultural, I was thinking of Egypt when ancient Egypt, everything was, well, a lot of birds and a
Yes.
lot of snakes. Um,
Yes. Yep,
so,
yep, yep. And
and
snakes, you can also, they're also a good one. But snakes are really different because in different cultures, they mean different things. But generally, if you see a snake, it's a spiritual message and it's generally a good one. It depends on what else is going on after the snake come, but usually it is normally a good one. And that's one that again is in my culture and at least 3, 4 other cultures that I know of have like a ancestral guide as a snake. So yeah, you're right. And we all spent time there. That's another thing. We all like we hit ancient civilizations. We all spent time in ancient civilizations. So when I work with people, sometimes like I'll be like, oh, Isis is here. Oh, so and so is here. And they're here because you used to work with them. And those guys will give you the mission. They'll say, when you worked with me, we did this, and you were supposed to do this and this. And then they help you. They'll be like, I'm giving you this. It's to help you remember that. And then, yeah, so those guys are always fun to talk to because some people have some really amazing missions. Like that's the one thing I've loved about my work is like getting to know these people through their soul and getting to know these people through like the mission they have. Like it's like, oh, this is so dope.
well, I think the general consensus is that human life originated in Africa, um,
Yes.
and spread around the world from that point. Um, do you, I don't know, do you get ancestral sort of readings about, okay, we're the originator, we,
Yes, I do.
we're more authentic than anybody else that you're going to speak
You
to.
know what's really funny? Like a lot of my friends are on that because I talk to a lot of African friends of mine who are in Africa and will say this to me all the time. Well, originally this came from Africa. Well, everything comes from Africa. So yeah, I hear you on that. As far as spiritually, not so much. They don't
Yeah.
flex like that in the spirit world. They just be like, it's not that I don't receive certain ones that I like, because I've seen like the mother of creation or the mother of the sea, and she's actually one of my guides, so I see her a lot. And sometimes she will say, well, we are, forefathers of everything, but normally no, they just come and assist who they can. But I have been shocked as to like sometimes who I see around them. Because, like I said, I worked with this girl. She was this little, she was actually one of my friends now, really great person from Australia. And, she kept telling me that, she was, well, not from, but living in Australia. She kept telling me that she'd been born in Africa, in South Africa specifically. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And when I did hers, like a whole tribe came through, and I was like, what? And it turns out she was a very special baby in that tribe. And I was like, oh, and she looked like a redhead, like tiny little redhead. And then she was surrounded by like this big African warriors. And I was like, oh wow, this is really funny. So yeah, often do get that sort of thing. That's how I started to notice that indeed we are all tied. Because no matter who I work with, they will have a tie to Africa somewhere, whether that's in the ancestry, whether that they just work there, whether they know they will always. So, but for the most part, no, like the ancestors are pretty cool. They don't normally flex. They just come, deliver the wisdom, and then they leave. The only time they're a little stubborn is like if it's something you absolutely need to do. I feel like ancestors and guides are different in the way that like ancestors are related to you, so they know you better. Guides are great and they help a lot. And it's not that they don't know you because they do. But with your ancestors, it's like you're talking to like your aunt or your uncle. And so they can actually be like, no, I'm not doing that. And then you're like, oh. But they do that so that you can essentially open up to different things. So I find that they're a little different to work with than other guides because they will sometimes have that personality that pulls back. But most of my guys don't have big personality, though I've worked with people and I know people in the industry whose guides have great big personalities. So maybe that's just a me thing. My ancestors don't have, well, my guys don't have like that boisterous, but my ancestors, I can always tell when they're around because yeah, the energy is different.
Okay. There have been throughout history, there have been cultures that were prolific and then they just disappeared. You got the ancient
Yes.
Babylonians, the ancient Greeks.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
ancestral record, do they have any information on that, or do they say, oh, we made a big mistake and you know,
So they essentially say that, it has to do with corruption. Every ancient big civilization was corrupted eventually by a person, like, or an energy of some sort that would corrupt the natural flow of it. And that's how everything just fell apart. For they often say that, it's not what it looks like on the surface. So on the surface, it might look like everything was cool, but there were definite movement of pieces underneath the surface that were essentially getting corrupted. And so if a lot of them became corrupted, then essentially that corruption would tear down that ancient civilization. Um, it's something they talk about sometimes when they talk about corruption mainly, and when they talk about the fall of certain empires, they will say like corruption was able to essentially like slide in, and once there's one person that thinks corruptly, then like essentially it's the matter of time before the whole thing comes down. So, but they also say that those things coming down was part of the great design, like that it wasn't just um this shocking event. Yeah, it was, but it was meant to go down so that it would give rise to all the other stuff, right? It would give rise to this era and this time where people were uncomfortable when there was a lot of things going on Earth that nobody was really down with, so that essentially the people could wake up and be like, okay, now we're gonna do this for good and nothing's gonna, stand in between and things. But they don't normally talk about things outside of um what is related to them. So either to their culture or to like a specific event. You can ask about, hey, what about this thing in the world? And they will give you their point of view for sure. But when they're just talking about things, a lot of times from the ancestors you'll hear things like about harmony, about like cycle of life type of things. And when I've even found that when I go to them and, I'm sad about something, it's always like, yeah, well, more will come. Like it's the great cycle of life, because they're very much outside of that earth vibration in a way, so they don't have that same feeling. But they do remember the feeling, if that makes sense.
um, and some of the ancient cultures, and they had a lot of um, gods, goddesses, things built into their mythology. Um,
Yes.
and we read it as mythology, but is there any essential truth to these gods and
Yeah,
beings? And they really exist?
where yeah, where they come from, there is definitely a lot of it. I think that where I'm from, we talk often about a lady of the water. This lady of the water is essentially the mother of the water, right? And this mother of the water is called Mamiwata. She appears in other cultures as mother of the water and something like that. She is someone that you would consider a myth in my country because it's a story that you'll hear about a woman in the water and how she essentially dominates or rules this water kingdom. And certain times she will come up and take women down to the water kingdom and have these women have children with the men that are there essentially for her kingdom to grow. And then once she's taught you everything you need to know and you've had the child, then she brings you back. There are plenty of reports of women or people who've disappeared and come back and who are like, yeah, I was down in the water world. Like, so I think that the best way I can answer that is in my country, or in those countries, it's very much believable. You go to Jamaica and they'll be like, yeah, you didn't see the guppy over there? Like, they really do believe and see those things. You would think of them as myths because you probably have never seen one and probably, aren't that who look you've just probably never seen one. But in those countries where they're able to do those things, as in like walk about, manifest on the ground, and manifest and do powerful things, yeah, I would say that it's very true. It's just they can't do it everywhere because not everywhere is their land, their ground, and things like that. Not to say that they're, less powerful when they're not on their land, but they're definitely more powerful on their land. So I've seen a lady of the water here in Hawaii, but she didn't look like she does back home because it's not, the same land, and so she can't draw from it the same way. But I have seen and here I've seen certain Hawaiian ones on the beach and things. So I do believe that yes, they do, but in the countries that they're in, if that makes sense. There are legit examples of ancestors and essentially, if you allow me to talk about a darker part, there are legit examples in our country. They say that the people who came over from the water and came to the US essentially like carried their deities with them. Some of them, the deities followed them to keep them safe into here. So now that those things have been here for a while, yeah, I say that that's why certain things happen here too. But for the most part, like they don't have as much power here because they left their home and went so far away. The only one that I would say still does is someone who's like connected to the wind or connected to the water, because those kind of people don't really have a home, right? Like, even though they do. Like, if you look into the Orishas, Ocean is one of the, like, they have an Ocean River in Nigeria because that's where she originates from. But you see her or her representation in many other places. So I hope that makes sense. Because, yeah,
Um, would it be right for us to identify an ancestral being as a specific being, but as a continuum? Say that energy has come from every generation forward to us. So,
yes, that is actually a beautiful way of looking at it, and is the way I hope that a lot of people end up looking at it. Yes, that's the way I see it. Is the ancestral energy is very much continuous, and it's very much. That's why in my country it's a river because the river always flows. It's very much you can pick from it whenever, but it does continue, and there's different like ways that people can come in and come out of that energy. But yeah, I would say it's a really good way to look at it that way, and I think that that's one of them. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on there. I definitely agree.
um, so what would we do if we wanted to become a client of yours?
As you can imagine, this work is fairly new.
Mhm.
I have my Instagram, and that's normally how people contact me. I have on there on a link my services, and also you can essentially message me. I also have under my name, my Facebook name, I have the same thing. I have a link where you can book any sort of work that you want with me, and you can also always send me a message. Um, Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I definitely had a website, but I was like, oh, I'm not going to need it. And now everywhere people are like, do you have a website?
Yeah.
So anyway, uh, yeah, Instagram and Facebook is what I usually use. And it's where you can find a lot of this work. Like a lot of my content on Instagram is geared towards that. I also have some channelings that I've done. Um, and things like that. So yeah, Facebook and Instagram right now is what I'm vibing with, and I pretty much, answer those messages pretty quickly. I just have to remember that I am in Hawaii, so it's like probably like a day behind, 18 hours behind. So if you don't hear from me the first 6 hours or something, it's okay. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook right now. I do plan on essentially rebuilding my website, but very differently this time around because when I first came on, I was all like love and light. And then, now I'm like ancestors. So now I'm doing something different. But Instagram and Facebook is where most of my clients find me. And I also get a lot of like word of mouth clients. Like I'll work with someone and then they'll be like, hey, so
Do you have other practitioners that you network with, or
Mhm.
you're in?
I normally work with my sister. It just makes sense because we are both from the same lineage and we both are spiritual. She doesn't do the same work I do. My sister's into the quantum field and she's a quantum healer essentially. And so she comes from the quantum and I'm very much shamanic, so I come from the earth and the two vibe very well together. So I haven't done them much, but if I need to do a session with my sister, I will. Or if I need something that my sister has or my client, I will definitely pull my sister into those. And I've done some work with other healers that was like more personal work, like, a healer heals a healer, that sort of thing I've done, which by the way is some of the best stuff to be able to trade things is really good. That's how it needs to go back to. But so yeah, Instagram and Facebook, and then I normally work with my sister who's a quantum healer, but she's also because she grew up in my family and things like that, she was also taught some shamanic things, and that's when like if I work with my sister, it's because you have like a family issue, and that family issue needs a lot of divinity put to it. And normally that's how that works. Or, if I decide for whatever case that reason is like I need her, then I'll use her. And sometimes that also has to do with energy because we are both family and we are both siblings. Sometimes you can come to me with sibling issues. That time I might use my sister as well because the energy flows better that way. And also because she's able to balance me and I balance her. So yeah.
Um, okay. Well, beside your sister, do uh, people and families generally share energies?
Yes, you can. Definitely. It's not something that is talked about a lot, but you can. So if you're a twin, you're definitely sharing energy. Twins share a lot and they have a constant bond. So through that bond, a lot can go on. When I was younger, someone tried to reach my sister through my connection with my sister. And it ended up really hurting her. Like it was a spiritual attack. And when we went to get help about it, we were told like, oh, they used your connection. And so for a while, like we had to physically like heal that connection. We had to do certain spiritual stuff in order to heal that connection because it had been messed with. So yes, siblings share, parents also share with their kids, which is why spiritually you cannot do anything to a child under the age of 18 without asking their parent. Like you can, right? You can do something negative, but that's a different kind of talk. But normally, like if you want to heal or work on, you have to ask because they share that bond and that energy. So the parent, unless the parent says yes, like you won't be able to penetrate. So or you won't be able to really work. So they do. People from the same family share energies. But it's normally like siblings and normally like the parents, mother and father, and also mother, father, and the kids. Normally, you won't get someone who's like sharing energy with their aunt or their uncle unless for some reason, again, that aunt and uncle became their main like raising person, right? Or like that person is now raising them or is really close to them for some reason. So yeah, you do share energies, which is why you want to clear your energies, which is why you want to do ancestral work because think about it. If you shared energy with your ancestors, which you do, you share DNA with them, and they haven't cleaned their stuff, and now you're sharing your good stuff with their unclean stuff, then it sort of brings yours down. That's why I like ancestral work, because when you start clearing theirs, it automatically lifts yours up. It automatically lifts a lot of things up. But yeah, you definitely share ancestral, you mean energy, and it definitely is something you should sort of be mindful of when you are around those people.
And how do we clear our energies?
For me, the best way is going outside or going on the water. So you can literally find some water, rinse your hands with it, you're done. You can rinse your hands and your face with it, you're done. As far as clearing any other way, you can go outside and put your hands or your feet on the ground or near on a tree. Trees are very healing. And essentially, give that sort of and it'd be like, I give all of the negative energy, or all of the energy that needs to go, I give it to the tree and I ask for it to be healed, or I give it to the land and I ask for it to be healed. With water, it just does it automatically, which is why I don't say a lot. But if you're a person that likes to say things, then you can say something like, I give the energy and I give it for healing. But I mean, there's so many ways. You can clear with smoke. You can clear with water. Like you can dunk your whole self in water if that's what you want to do. You can clear by going outside. The easiest way to clear is just to imagine it, like to visualize it. You can visualize essentially a either golden white or pearlescent sort of pink white light. And you can imagine just like what I like to imagine is like a shower of it. It just like falling over me, over my aura, over my energy, and it clearing little by little everything that's there. If you've done it right, you'll feel the shift. Like it'll be like something just lifted, like your vision just cleared, or like you had a headache and now it's gone. Like you'll feel the shift if you've done it right. And then again, it's really easy to do. We should all do it every night. Like there are, of course, many ways. You can go on YouTube and Google this, and you can create a bubble, and that bubble can help you clean that energy. That bubble can help you protect yourself. There are a million and one ways. I always like easiest because I'm like that. And for me, because I live here in Hawaii, the easiest is just to go outside or to go in the water or to wash my hands. I'm very much a water person. So that's the way I do it. But yeah, you can literally just close your eyes, ask for your energy to be cleared, visualize the white light going through all of the chakras, or all of your aura, and done. You don't really, if you need a whole lot to clear an energy, then you need to do different kind of work. Essentially, like don't just clear the energy, heal whatever is going on. If you're like, oh, I'm clearing, but nothing is clearing, then something else is going on, and you need to figure out what that is. But yeah, it's pretty easy. My favorite way to clear is through sound. I love to dance, and I love to listen to those like meditation things in the background. So that's another great way to clear. You can do a bell sound. You can do a sort of like, meditation type sound. You can do drumming. You can clear it again, just about any way you want to.
Um, and you, no, 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 how on? You've helped people physically correct, help people correct physical ailments and um,
Ancestral healing isn't quite for that,
mhm,
unless it's something that is, I mean, obviously, I've helped mainly with like fertility issues, womb issues, them kind of issues. I've also helped with sort of like safety issues, which all come from there. But not really like healed someone's side or things like that. No. And my like when I'm healing, like as a regular healer, that's one thing. But in my ancestral healing, it's not for that. It's for healing things like the rift in your family between your great grandmother or your grandmother and your mother and yourself. It's for healing things like your fertility, like your womb. If something is going on with your organs and you cannot produce more people, your ancestors are gonna help with that for sure. Things that like are really important to them. Will they help you with your breathing and things like that? If you need it, yes. Like let's say you have asthma and you're like, yo, I really need to find a different way. They will help you physically because they want you physically to be okay. Yes, so that will happen. But I not used it to like, I don't know, heal things that would need surgery or anything like that. No, no, no. It's mainly for healing emotional and healing those kind of things that are getting to, like your aura, your spiritual, your energetics. It's for healing those kind of things. Does it heal your physical body? Like I said, when it comes to sexual organs, ancestors are great for figuring out what is wrong and healing those things and really helping you get some release, to say the least. They are great for that. But when it comes to like, healing your eyesight or healing, like, it's not that they won't do it. You'll have to ask and then they'll show you the process. That's when you'll get the 1, 2, 3 process. But my sessions are usually like 1-time sessions or 2-time sessions. I don't heal those kind of things in 2 sessions. No, like there's no way. I'm not that kind of medical healer. No. For like, but they can tell you if something is going on. So if you're like, hey, I think this is going on with me, they can be like, yeah, that's what's going on. So if people come to me about those kind of things when they have issues and they're like, I think this is, then the ancestors will say, yeah, that's what's going on. They need to see a doctor and then they need to use this plant. Or they'll say things like, yeah, this is what's going on. And they need to get on this right away. But and that's how they help you more so. Like, I'm not a lay hands and heal type of person. No. The ancestors want to help you heal your relationships with your family, and they want to help you heal your body so that you can have more ancestors and more to your kids, and you can expand your line. Like, they want you to live that rich life so that their line expands, and they want you to be happy doing it, obviously. So they'll help with that. Yes. And if you're really ill, like super ill, like you have a an illness, like a chronic condition, they will help with that. I have chronic conditions, but not in the way you think. It's not like, oh, they're gonna put hands or I'm gonna go to sleep and then tomorrow the doctor's gonna be like, I don't know how you healed that. No, that's not how that works.
Um, so the ancestors are looking favorable to an expanding universe, as you say.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
there are no signs of problems on the horizon.
The ancestors are optimistic always. They are realist, true, but they're optimistic always. So there are signs, but what they say is, those things should be worked out by the time they get to them, essentially. And yeah, some of those things is, the things that are going on in ancestral lands, the kind of torture and the kind of pain and the kind of stuff they still seeing there, right? So yeah, they see those things and they don't like those things. So they see those things and they see where the future is in those things. But they will say like, well, by the time it gets to that point, hopefully it's like that. But again, if they start seeing that you're not moving in that direction, ancestors, unlike guides, will push you. Like, I don't think guides push you enough, but ancestors will definitely get pushy with you if they see that being you're going in a way that's going to harm you, especially in a way that's going to harm you. They will get really pushy because they don't want you harmed. So if the kind of future we're going into is that kind of future where there's a lot of harm, a lot of pain, they will say something. And they're saying something now when it comes to, especially a lot of, because ancestors, traditional ancestors, um from the ancestral lands and stuff, are not, except unless you're talking Native American. I'm talking like my African ancestors and stuff, like, and the guys that are not in the US, those guys, they have, a lot to say usually about the conditions in Africa or the conditions that are going on in, certain places in the world where there is war and things like that. Like, the ancestors weep, they feel those things, and they also, want those things gone because they know that it kills a lot of ancestors. It kills a lot of future ancestors. It's killing generations. It's killing lineages. It's ending families' names. You know what I mean? When you have those kind of wars where like even the children are freaking going to war, or like the families are being split up, those kind of things do harm not just yourself and the things around here, but everything, right? They're felt in the spirit world as well. Like the ancestors, like even like deities of the land, like the water woman that I see, like she weeps. And as a matter of fact, I had to stop getting close on that one because every time, like, I would just cry and cry and cry and cry, and about essentially what is going on. Like, they feel those things. So yeah, there's much to say, but also they're hoping that it all gets cleared by the time things happen. But as we get closer to it, they do things and say things. And if you're listening, then if you are able to pinpoint those things. But essentially, it's that that the conditions of the world are changing, and they need to change. And they need to change because if they don't, then, there's not going to be much of a world to leave to the children. We're supposed to also be future ancestors. So we're supposed to be mindful of what we leave to the next generation. And the ancestors are saying, the way you're going, you ain't leaving much. That's essentially, the thing.
Um, are there special general, well, I saw a thing the other day about Lionsgate. So
Yes.
that is that a there are these little special dates and special markers that we're supposed to pay attention to?
Yes, there are indeed. And I mean, again, I feel like it depends on you, because certain things you'll feel more than others. Like I usually feel Lionsgate's times a million. It comes around my birthday. Well, it opens up around my birthday. I was born July 30th. So right around that time is like a little before is when the gateway opens. So I'm always like super, I can feel the energy. All the other years, it's like my birthday. It's like a brand new day. It's like New Year's. I'm like, what? I'm always super happy. And then this time around, because of everything that was going on with me and the fact that it's essentially one that's never been seen before because of everything else that is going on in the world, then that one I didn't feel it as much. But I was listening to, other healers and stuff, and they were like, oh, you're probably not gonna start feeling until like the 12th or the 13th. So I'm not an astrologer, but I follow people who, are in touch with those things. And the ancestors are in touch with those things. So they also say stuff to me certain times. Lionsgate is essentially like the galactic new year. So when those doors open, all this lovely rush of energy it flows in. And around Lionsgate, there's a lot of help in the spirit world for you to open up to this new year, this new reality, this new timeline that opens up for you. So around those times, yes, ancestors and guides will be more active. They might deliver an activation for you. They might give you a certain initiation. They might give you a certain dream that you're like, oh, now you got to follow that dream. So, but this time is essentially, they're like, this is the time of possibility and opportunity. And you got to be able to tap into like, okay, maybe this isn't working for me. I need to pivot this way. Or maybe, or even if you hear something, you keep seeing the same thing over and over again. Like one of my clients, she kept seeing a book. And she was like, and it's so weird because I feel like I read this book somewhere, or she's like, this book is familiar to me. And I was like, okay, let's go see what the book is. And then when I saw the book, she was like, oh, it has my name on it. And I was like, yeah, I think this is your book. And then she realized that it was indeed her book. And she was like, oh my gosh, Georgia, I've been like thinking I should write a book. And I was like, I'm pretty sure the book says you already wrote it. You just got to sit down and write it. And, that was her thing. But that was one of the things she followed. And she's like halfway through writing her book. So it really, you have to work on yourself to be able to see the opportunities that are coming, even if it's not a spiritual thing, right? Even if you're not a spiritual person and you're just in your life grinding 9 to 5, you might get a raise, you might get an opportunity to do a different job, you might get an opportunity to travel with your job. If you're not working on your job, if you're not actively going to work and doing the things, you're not getting those opportunities, or you might not know about them. So it's really about, I understand that everybody don't feel the same way I do about, ancestors and things, but it's really about start doing the things, right? Because if you start to heal, if you start to work on yourself one way or the other, everything will catch up to you, right? And little by little, it'll come. So your journey with the ancestors, it will start. It might not start like me straight away. I just happen to have been in that milieu, and I just happen to have been raised in those things. So for me, that's how it started. I had a very different experience. My mother died. I was young. She, according to our rules in our culture, she then became my first guide and my first ancestor, and she was really strong. I mean, she still is when it came to like guiding me. And so I was able to do the things. But yeah, I feel like if you're not opening yourself up, if you're not thinking about how to make your life better, if you're not thinking about the way other people in your family did things, and these are not the things I want to be doing, then you're not able to see the things that come in for you. If you're just stuck on your, well, this is me, 9 to 5, I do this, I do that. Like, if you're not actively putting mindfulness to your process, then you're not aware of the opportunities. And right now in Lionsgate, it comes around every year, but this year is unlike any other because of all the other elements in the sky. And so they're saying like this year is even better than all the others, or is even greater. The energy is even more than all the others. So this is the year that if you want to pivot, if you want to start something, if you want to shift, if you want to, I don't know, heal that whatever thing in the back of your knee you keep ignoring, this is the year to do that because that's what it's for. Yeah.
Um, do you think there are very special places? I know some energy practitioners believe there are energy vortexes in the world that are more energetic or spiritual than most
Than
other ones.
others? I
Yeah.
don't. Okay, so I don't think there are more spiritual than others. I do think that there are areas on Earth that are more spiritual than other areas. And that has to do with the kind of work that was done on those lands. For example, me and my home, there's certain places where like people just stand and be like, oh my gosh, it feels so good here. And it's because I've done so much work in this home, like a spiritual work that I've actually, one of the things I did was create pillars of light. So if you stand in certain areas and you're unable to see them, you just happen to bump into them and you just happen to be in one, then you'll feel the difference. So it in areas where you do repeated spiritual work, then a certain energy gathers. And if people have been doing repeated spiritual work in that area for generations or for centuries, that energy is there, right? And that's what creates those vortexes and things like that. There's very specific places that people are like, we're going to access spirit from there. And every time you go, it's like an altar, you grow that energy. So yes, I do believe that there are some. There's one here, a really beautiful one here I discovered. So I do believe that those things are there because, like I said, I'm able to see them, and I saw one here and I was like, oh wow. So yeah, those things are really great at helping you because just being around that energy, because it's so much and it's so activating, it can really like shift your aura and things. That's why people go to Sedona and things like that. I've never been, but that's why people go to Sedona and, go to Joshua Tree or go to these places to like be able to tap into those vortexes of light to see essentially like what is there for them for upgrades and things. So I do believe they exist. Yes, I do.
Wow. Very good. I think I'm running out of questions. So what is
Good.
it that we have not touched on that you would like to explain to us?
Hmm. I think I would like to say this. If you have lost someone before, then you already have an ancestor. And that ancestor, more than likely, is trying to help you. If you've never lost anyone, you still have ancestors, and those ancestors are here to assist you. I think that you tapping into that bank of data or into that energy to see what's there is something that everyone should do because it might surprise you as to what's there and how it can help you. Um, but ultimately, I think we are all meant to find our own alignment. And however that works out for you, I want to encourage each and every one of you to keep doing that. Keep working towards your own alignment. Eventually, your time with the ancestors will start. Like, it's part of the journey. Once you figure out who you are, part of figuring out who you are is figuring out your roots. So whether you do it in the beginning, in the end, I'm pretty sure eventually you'll be touched by an ancestor. And I hope that then you're able to really take that journey because it is one that really can and will change your life.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very enlightening. It's been thought-provoking, and I'm happy that we had this conversation.
Thank you.
And, you
Thank you.
really did,
Yes.
you did a great presentation for us. Um, so for
Thank
other people listening, we will have a new discussion next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And until then, good night.
you.
Right.